Every online game with an economy eventually has the same disaster. The market crashes, prices collapse, gold becomes worthless, and players who felt rich on Friday are wiped out by Monday. Economists have a colder word for it. They call it a recession. But it is the exact same event, a server-wide wipe. And the strangest part is this: it happens to everyone at once, including the players who did absolutely nothing wrong. So let's break down how the whole server crashes, why it always seems to come out of nowhere, who gets hit the hardest, and the one move that turns a recession from the worst thing that can happen to you into the best. First, what a recession actually is. Strip away the headlines and it's simple. A recession is when the entire economy shrinks for months at a time, less is produced, less is bought, fewer people are working. The classic rule of thumb is 2 straight quarters of the economy getting smaller instead of bigger. But the technical definition matters less than the feeling, which every player knows in their gut. Suddenly, the whole server is poorer all at once. But to understand the crash, you have to understand the party that comes before it. Because no server wipes while everyone is being careful. It wipes at the peak of the boom. Good times roll. Players feel confident, so they spend. Businesses see all that spending, so they expand and hire. Banks hand out cheap loans, so everyone borrows. Prices for everything, houses, stocks, gold, climb higher and higher, and the higher they climb, the more players pile in. Terrified of missing out, the game feels infinite. Everyone is up. Nobody wants to hear that it could ever end. And every boom comes with a story for why it can never end. In the late 1990s, it was internet stocks. Profits didn't matter anymore because it was a new economy. In the 2000s, it was houses. Prices had never fallen nationwide, so everyone believed they never could. The details change. The story is always the same, and it always rhymes with 4 of the most expensive words in finance. This time is different. That right there is the setup for every wipe in history. The boom quietly builds the bomb. Then comes the trigger. It is almost never the thing people expected. A bubble finally pops. A bank fails. Energy prices spike. Interest rates climb, and suddenly all that cheap debt isn't cheap anymore. It doesn't really matter which domino falls first. What matters is the moment confidence cracks. The instant enough players look around and think, wait, were these prices ever real? And once that thought spreads, it spreads like wildfire. Here is the part that makes a recession a true server-wide event and not just a few unlucky players. It is a doom loop. Watch how it feeds itself. Nervous players stop spending. But your spending is someone else's income, so businesses suddenly earn less. Earning less, they cut costs, which mostly means one thing: layoffs. Now those laid-off workers are terrified, so they stop spending too, which means even more businesses earn less, which means even more layoffs. Fear creates the exact thing everyone is afraid of. It is a bank run, but on the entire economy at once. And you can watch it move through real people. A factory cancels an order. The supplier lays off a worker. That worker stops eating out, so the restaurant loses business and cuts a waiter. That waiter cancels a vacation, so a hotel goes quiet. Not one of those people did anything wrong. They were just standing downstream when the fear arrived. Which is why a recession feels so brutally unfair. You can do everything right. Keep your job, pay your bills, avoid debt, and still get wiped. Your company loses a client you never met and cuts your department. Your home loses value because 3 strangers down the street had to sell at a loss. The whole point of a server-wide wipe is that the server is shared. When it goes down, it takes the careful players down with the reckless ones. But not equally. Some players always get hit far harder than others. The most exposed are the ones who borrowed the most, the over-leveraged. When you owe a fortune and your income suddenly stops, the math turns violent fast. Right behind them are the players who bought in last, at the very top, just before the peak, convinced the boom would never end. They paid the highest prices right before those prices fell the furthest. The heroes of the boom become the casualties of the bust. So how bad does it get? Let's look at the scoreboard of the modern era. In the Great Depression, the ultimate server wipe, a quarter of all workers lost their jobs, and the stock market lost almost 90% of its value. In 2008, the global financial system came within inches of total collapse, and millions lost their homes. In 2020, the economy fell off a cliff in a matter of weeks. Each one felt in the moment like the end of the game itself. And here is the single most important fact in this entire video. Every single one of those servers came back online. Look at the long chart of the market across an entire century, and the crashes are real, they are violent, and they are also, every time, temporary. The Great Depression gave way to the longest boom in history. 2008 was followed by more than a decade of gains. The 2020 crash recovered in months. The market has been declared dead more times than anyone can count, and every single time, eventually, it has respawned and gone on to a new high. Part of the reason is that the developers refuse to let the server stay down. When a wipe hits, the game masters step in. The central bank slashes interest rates to make borrowing cheap again. The government floods the economy with emergency spending. It is the equivalent of the devs handing out free revives and a server-wide buff to get everyone playing again. It doesn't prevent the wipe, and it isn't free. That flood of money can fuel inflation down the road. But it does tend to pull the server back online faster than it would recover on its own. So if recessions are inevitable, and recoveries are too, the only thing left that you actually control is how you play the wipe. And almost everyone plays it exactly wrong. When the crash hits and the screen turns red, every instinct in your body screams the same command. Sell everything, log off, get out before it goes to zero. And that instinct is the single most expensive mistake a player can make. Because selling in the crash does just one thing. It takes a temporary, on-paper loss and makes it permanent and real. The players who get truly wiped out by a recession are rarely the ones who held on. They are the ones who panic-sold at the bottom, and then watched, sick to their stomach, as the server came roaring back without them. And here's the cruel timing of it. Nobody rings a bell at the bottom. The market usually turns and starts climbing while the news is still terrible, while everyone still feels broke and afraid. So the players waiting for things to feel safe again almost always buy back in higher than they sold. They didn't just take a loss. They paid for the privilege of missing the recovery. Because here is the secret that flips the entire game. A recession is not just a disaster. For a player with a steady income and a cool head, it is the single greatest sale the market ever runs. Everything, stocks, homes, businesses, goes on sale at the exact moment everyone else is too scared to buy. Picture two players in 2008. One panics and sells at the bottom. The other just keeps quietly buying a little every month, all the way down and all the way back up. A decade later, they are not in the same place. They are not even close. The boring truth of investing is that the largest fortunes are quietly built in the wreckage of recessions, by the players calm enough to keep buying while everyone else is rage quitting. So strip it all away, and a recession is simply the server resetting. The boom builds up too much excess, too much debt, too much hype, and the wipe is the brutal, necessary purge that clears it out and makes the next boom possible. It is not the end of the game. It is the reset that lets the game continue. The crashes are real. The fear is real. The lost jobs and lost savings are devastatingly real and never to be waved away. But underneath all of it runs one stubborn pattern that is held for as long as we have records. The server always comes back online. The only real question when it finally does is whether you panicked and logged off, or whether you were still standing there ready to play.